So I want to ask both of y'all this question, just sticking to the idea of how distance of the race influences your pick for a shoe, not terrain, not anything else, just the distance itself. BJ, what do you like in a 5K shoe versus a half marathon or marathon shoe? What are there differences between what you like in those two categories?
Yeah, something you said on the show a couple weeks ago is stuck in my head. Like, you can suffer through a 5K because it's short. For me, it's like just under 20 minutes. So I can go with something that's maybe going to be a little bit less comfortable. So I want something that's not going to get in my way when I'm trying to run fast. And there have been a couple super shoes, even ones that I really like for longer distances, that feel like they, I don't have anything scientific here, but they feel like they impede my mechanics a little bit when my stride opens up, or probably when my cadence increases going at 5K pace versus half marathon or tempo pace. So I'm okay if it's a little firmer, because some of the softer shoes feel like I'm getting bogged down on the ground and the road a little bit too much. Whereas it's the opposite. I haven't run a marathon. I've only run a few halves.
Okay.
But it's the opposite for a half, where I want some more softness and I want some more cushion, because I know, especially if I'm not doing well, I'm going to get tired, come mile 9, mile 10, and I'm going to need something to help me out a little bit more than something that I would love to just rip a 5K in.
Yeah. David, is that similar for you, or any differences?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. When I take a look at approaching a 5K, and this is actually really interesting, because depending on 5K versus 10K, that choice might change again. Because 10K is still double what 5K is. So like what you can suffer through a 5K in, by mile 5, that might be a little bit different. And I try to take a look at how do I feel when I'm pushing in the shoe, like not just like effortless wise, but like how does the shoe feel? Do I feel like I'm getting anything from it? Because some of these shoes are a little bit more bouncy the harder you punch them into the ground. And some of them like you to just follow in rhythm and stay there. And so that's one thing that I've really paid a little bit more attention to when I'm trying out certain shoes. And it's interesting, because like a sharply rockered shoe, I might not like that as much for, say, a 5K or 10K. I might want something with a little bit more of a flatter geometry that I'm punching into the ground and using my calves a little bit more for, because I can afford it. And I've also like trained up to that to some degree. And like if I'm using a very flat kind of quick track type perspective, I've got a couple shoes here to the side, but my 5K PR now is in the Nike Dragonfly. I don't know if I'd wear it for the full 10K. And that's me being fully honest. I actually really like the Adidas Avanti. I feel like I get a little bit faster, a little bit more pop out of the Dragonfly. Like if I had to go 1,500, 5K, I'm going to go Dragonfly easily between these two. But for 10K, I put in a little bit smaller spikes. It's got a little bit more of a forgiving geometry to it. Spike plate's not as crazy. I can fall into rhythm a little bit more, but still run fast and not have to worry about it. I'm probably going to go Avanti. And so that's also where things come in on the road as well, where you have these shoes like the New Balance SC Pacer, which you can use all the way up to half marathon. I mean, people are running really fast in this at the distances too. It's still fuel cell. It's still a respectable stack, but it's lower than what a lot of these other super shoes on the market are. So I think it also depends on your own personal feel. Like, do you like it high up, squishy, bouncy, or do you like it a little bit firmer and snappier, a little bit lower to the ground? And go off of how you feel when you're actually loading something quickly.
So for you, rhythm is a really good point, David. I think about running 5K shoe. I almost want something that I have to force myself to stay on top of to get the maximum benefit out of, because it kind of helps me push harder. It's 5K. I don't want to get in quite as much of a rhythm as I would in a half marathon or a 10K. Whereas I don't want to have to be fighting against a shoe if I'm getting tired in a 10K or getting tired in a half marathon. I want to know it's going to keep me going and keep me in rhythm versus having to, make sure I'm up on my forefoot or push harder with the heel or something like that to know that I'm getting the most benefit out of it.
Which shoes for both of you, maybe you can start, BJ, like when you think about your ideal 5K shoe, what pops into your head? What do you gravitate towards?
I think I want something that is on the firmer end of soft. This is something we always talk about, is how differently we define firm and soft, and I think all three of us have very different definitions right
We
here.
do.
But in my, old numbered line of firm versus soft, I want something that's a little bit on the firmer side, and feels really snappy and rockered off the toe a little bit.
Okay.
And wait, did you just ask about 5K or did you ask about other ones too?
You can go further up too, and if you have any specific shoes too, like
Okay.
I like this shoe for 5K, you can say that too.
I mean, I ran the latest 5K that I did. I ran a handful of them over the summer. The latest one was an Adios Pro 2. I'm behind a year because I got it on sale.
Heck yeah.
But it was great, and it did what I was just talking about, where I felt like I had to run on rails, because like literal rails, because it's got the rods in it.
Yeah.
But it felt like it was just keeping me like very much in a straight line when I was running.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to define, but and every time I would kind of get tired and kind of felt like I was leaning back a little bit. It was like, oh no, gotta stay up, gotta keep pushing. And
That's a
really helped
noticeable
me-
rocker too.
Yeah, very noticeable rocker.
Yeah.
Helped me stay mentally focused, which is a weird thing to rely on a shoe to do, but
Sure.
it definitely did.
I will say the Adios Pro 2 is such a fun shoe at the forefoot. It's so poppy and bouncy.
It is.
But I had the same feeling. If you start getting tired, you start slipping back a little bit, you almost start fighting the platform.
Yeah, and it doesn't have as much in the heel as some of the other super shoes do. Both like physically, it's a pretty narrow heel. I don't
Yeah,
have
the
it in
width,
front of me,
it's
but a-
pretty narrow.
It's real narrow. It works for me because it's got a big lateral heel bevel on it. That's how I can manage to run it, even though it's got the crazy cutout midfoot. But when I fall back on my heels, which is what I tend to do when I get tired, there's not as much give there to it. So I need to stay up on the platform, more forward on it, for it to keep pushing me forward.
Yeah. It's funny. I would agree with you in terms of style and shoes that popped into my head for 5K preference. Adios Pro 2 is one of them. That was like I said, that's my 5-mile PR. So that I enjoyed it for that really pushing, and even in that last mile when I was really tired, that was a really fun race, by the way. I was running against like the high school cross country guys, just a couple of them during their off season. So, but I ended up kicking him down, and I won that race. It's the only race I've ever won, and probably will ever win in my life. But I was about to give up at like 4 1/4, and then all of a sudden he fell off my shoulder, and I'm like, I guess I can't give up now. But back to the shoe, I think that it had just enough rocker to it where it just kept me forward, and I really appreciated that. Another shoe that I really like for those shorter distances, and I don't even know if it's available anymore, but I really like the Skechers Speed Elite, the original Speed Elite, just because it's lower, but it really had a rigid, it felt like a road track spike, but it didn't wreck my calves. Like I also ran my PR half marathon in that shoe, but I really liked it for those really getting the legs turned over because it was so light, and it had that really aggressive toe spring and forefoot rocker that I just love, just kind of propulsing off of that. But when you think 5K, David, what shoes do you think of? I know you mentioned a couple, but I don't know if those were your picks.
Yeah, so when I think of the 5K, I actually do like a little bit of that flatter geometry, like I said. I like having a little bit of toe spring, but I like to feel like I'm really bouncing and popping off the forefoot. And so a couple shoes that I think of pretty quickly, the first two to come to mind, outside of Alpha 1, but we've got the Puma Fast R and the Asics Metaspeed Edge Plus. With the Asics Metaspeed Edge Plus, Turbo Foam has always felt a little bit firmer to me, but still bouncy. Like it still has that bounce off the forefoot. The geometry on it isn't quite as crazy as the other super shoes. You still have a heel bevel, you still have a toe spring, but it's a little bit more gradual. And then the plates, it is sharply rockered at the end. You feel that when you're running, but it's not so dramatic that you feel like you're falling off of the front. So I like that aspect of like I'm pushing into the ground and this shoe is pushing me off with what I'm putting into the ground. And so the same thing goes with the Puma Fast Forward. A little bit different here because you have the EVA heel. So
Fast
it's a
R.
really Fast R.
Fast R.
EVA heel, sharply rocker, just transitions you really quick into that forefoot. And then the forefoot is that like nitrogen infused P-backs, that Nitro Elite that they call it. Mm-hmm. Very bouncy, very poppy at the forefoot. It's a shoe that just transitions really quickly and just bounces you forward. So it kind of I like to feel like I'm always a little bit forward when I'm running a 5K.
Yep.
And then when it comes to 10K, I like that same feeling, but I want to make sure that I'm still alive by the end of that race. So thankfully, both of these shoes still have a good amount of stack and like enough of a geometry to like I can still back off a little bit and still be fine.
Yeah.
But for 5K, 10K distances, I'd probably choose either one of these. And for the 10K, I might even go Vaporfly Next Percent too. That's when that starts dabbling back into that conversation for me. Yeah. Light, rockered, still has a little bit of a bounce at the front. I'm pretty sure everybody knows what that shoe looks like at this point, but that's this guy right here. Yeah. My 9.5, I think it's like 7 ounces. It's like 7.0 or something like that. They're all pretty comparable. Like they're not far off of each other. But I can pick up my legs quick. It's got a good bounce coming off the forefoot. And when I'm running a 5K pace in those shoes, I feel like I'm just a little bit high up in the Vaporfly. Like, I just don't think I'd quite reach for it for 5K. But for me, for 10K, like, that type of pacing to half marathon, that shoe is pretty darn good. And I can settle right in. So it would be a little bit of a toss-up. I think it would just depend kind of on what the course looks like at that point as to which shoe I choose.
Let's transition a little bit to course and how that may influence stuff. But before we do that, I think one other point I wanted to bring up about distance and running economy testing and how that influences your shoe choice. You know, this is not my area of expertise. I'll be the first to admit that. However, I think something to consider is, you know, at best, you know, some of these shoes are going to give you a 3% ish, 3 to 4% improvement in running economy as compared to a control shoe. Like he's used the Hyperspeed from Asics, not compared to the Metaseed Sky or not compared to the Endorphin Pro. Like depending on what you choose, if you're in that realm, you're thinking about a 0.5% to 1% to 2% difference. And I think when you think about over the course of a marathon, that running economy improvement is going to have a larger impact on performance potentially than it will for a 5K, which is so short. I think that's the other part where you have a little bit more freedom to go towards preference and what's going to help you up here in your head, because performance is not defined by running economy. Performance is this huge conglomerate of all of our mental and physical preparation and kind of how we feel that day, how we slept. You know, you can't predict performance based on your shoe. And so I think when you're at a 5K, you have a little more freedom to find the thing that you feel the fastest in, because that psychological benefit might give you just that little extra push that might give you more benefit than if you had the one that didn't feel good but gives you the little bit of running economy boost just because of how short the race is. So I do think that's something to consider as well.